Well, welcome everybody to our online program on addiction and recovery from the Sunshine Coast Health Center up here in Powell River, BC. And we've been talking about Rob Ford. And in particular, an article that came out in the Star about what rehab would be like if Rob Ford were to actually go to rehab. And according to the article, Rob Ford would have to learn humility. He would have to follow instructions or get kicked out. He'd have to give up a lot of his rights as a person living in Canada. I mean, all of these ideas. In other words, what's going to happen, baseline, is that the therapy staff will feel that it's their job sort of to take control over Rob Ford while he's getting his treatment. Mainly because addicts really can't be trusted, their lives are in complete disarray, their best thinking got them to where they are, and all these other ideas. Okay. Well, it's interesting that a lot of modern treatment really doesn't accept some of these older ideas. And one of the things that would happen to Rob Ford with a lot of therapists is that the therapist would feel the need to work with Rob Ford. In other words, the idea that the therapist would impose some kind of way of thinking or impose some kind of way of acting on the client is not routine. It's certainly not what any of us is taught in graduate school in psychology, unless, of course, it's maybe the client is young or incapacitated in some way. Then that's a little different. But this dealing with routine run-of-the-mill person who suffers with addiction, we don't feel the need to tell them what to do or how to think or even how to feel, right? And it's kind of interesting, some very famous psychologists, Richard Ryan and Edward Deci, I mean, they developed this thing called self-determination theory. But they pointed out that, I mean, it may be okay to impose a certain way of thinking on someone, but if the person doesn't buy into it, then it's a complete waste of time. Because all they're going to do is that they're just going to do things to avoid punishment or to get praise. Or they may, if they absorb it a little bit, maybe they'll sort of use it as a weapon or a way to be arrogant. But at any rate, it only really works if the thing imposed upon someone is completely absorbed by the person. And so really what you're going to need is for the person to really buy into this hook, line, and sinker. But what happens if the person really doesn't believe in it? For example, I mean, we all know that one of the keys to Alcoholics Anonymous or any 12-step program is a belief in some kind of benevolent, positive power in the universe, of which then the person's job to get recovery is to tap into that power. But what happens if you don't believe this? What happens if you're the great Nobel Prize-winning alcoholic artist Eugene O'Neill, where he didn't believe that? Or you're the great philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, he didn't believe that, and a lot of people don't believe that today. So the chances are these kind of people, if they were addicts, that would get some really good help from the 12-step program. It's highly questionable because the whole 12-step program has an assumption that that there is this positive, benevolent force in the universe, right? So again, if you don't believe that, chances are you're not really going to figure this out all that well, and so the 12-step program may not work out for you that well. Just as an example. But anyway, it's this idea of, yes, it'll work. You can impose an idea, a frame of reference, a way of making sense of the addiction on a person, but if the person really doesn't buy into it, it doesn't resonate with the facts of their existence, and it doesn't seem to help them, then really, I mean, it's not really going to do very much for the person, right? And so this is one of the main reasons why a lot of modern therapists work with the client. How does the client make sense of things, right? And rather than telling them what to do, if a client says, oh, I plan to go get drunk after I finish treatment, we don't say, no, don't do that, that's being bad. No, we get curious with them. Well, what's the attraction of that for you? And so we're gonna move with the client. William Miller, who's done a great deal of research on motivational interviewing, has suggested that it is actually the therapist that creates resistance in clients. by telling them what to think, what to do. And so if I were to say to a client, who's just told me he wants to go get drunk, and I'd say, no, don't do that, it's terrible. What do you remember your family. Boy, that's terrible. Then that person would likely create resistance. And then they would, who knows, they would just react to, well, now that you tell me not to, I'm going to go do it. That kind of idea. But at any rate, again, modern therapists would tend to work with the client rather than tell the client to just follow instructions, do what you're told to do, don't think, all that kind of thing that we found in the Star article. Anyway, we'll be back next time with another little comment on Rob Ford and what would happen if he were in treatment.